The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the Association for Software Testing, its management, sponsors, or staff.
So we have Alessandra, and say your last name to see if I did it right.
Moreira.
Did I do it right?
That was pretty close.
You can call me Ellie.
It took 2 tries, though.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
My notes weren't very helpful. So you had a session. So let's back up a little bit.
Yep.
First time at Cast or no?
Second time at Cast.
Second time,
yes.
But first time as a speaker.
First time as a speaker.
And how did that go?
It went really well. It went much better than what I was expecting, actually. So
what were you expecting?
A new speaker. It's the second time that I'm speaking at a conference, so I was not very sure what to expect. So I tend to always expect the worst and hope for the best, and that's exactly what happened.
They didn't boo you or anything.
No, there was no tomatoes in my face, so I was quite glad with that. Yeah.
So you had a topic that I thought was really interesting, at least from the title.
Right.
So it says, "My boss would never go for that."
Yes.
Right. Oh, we got.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So your boss wouldn't go for that.
Yep.
What does that mean? so tell us a little bit.
Really
what
open.
is that exactly?
Yeah. So. I'll give a bit of background about my own testing history that helps with understanding that title. I was a scripted tester for half of my career, so I was following scripts in and out, getting very bored of testing at that point. And then I finally met Anne-Marie Charrett. I learned all about context-driven testing. She became a good friend and my mentor. And after that, I tried a lot to convince the bosses that I had at the time to try context-driven testing as well, because I had just discovered it. I was very excited about it, and I thought they were going to be very excited as well. And some of them were definitely not as excited as I was. So,
no.
Yes, surprise,
Surprising.
Exactly.
That never happened.
So now, were you dealing in a situation where you did your bosses understand what context-driven testing was?
That was one of the problems, because I was new to it at that stage, and I understood the concepts and I understood the theory around it. However, I don't think I was able to articulate well to them what context-driven testing was, or exploratory testing, or session-based test management, or any of that type of jazz. So that's what my presentation was about. If for people that are in the same situation where they're trying to convince or persuade the managers about trying new things. Because especially when you come to conferences like this, we leave with so many awesome ideas that we want to implement in our workplaces straight away. And we may not be able to, because our manager may not be so interested in it. So my whole talk was about how lessons that I learned on how to persuade a manager into trying new things if they are not really interested in trying.
Okay. So one of the things you mentioned in your abstract is you talk about exposing some of the myths of context-driven testing. So what would be a myth of context-driven testing that might turn a manager around and they go, you know what, you're right, we are going to go do this?
I think one of the questions that I get asked the most from managers that never heard about context-driven testing is they hear the word exploratory testing and they think exploratory testing is ad hoc testing. But there is no documentation that I worked in a lot of risk-averse environments, so banks, insurance companies, and auditing always comes up. So they say, well, if you're doing exploratory testing and there is no test cases, how am I going to report back to auditing? So it's actually explaining to them that exploratory testing is not about not having test cases. So I find that that's one of the questions that comes up the most.
So it's really not about context-driven myth, but rather a myth about a technique that is commonly or regularly used in our community.
Exactly.
And I've been in regulated too. I've done FDA work, and I use exploratory testing for it.
Yeah.
And it pretty much freaked people out the first
it
time I
does,
did it. You're absolutely right about that. And it was absolutely a myth.
Yeah.
So I've experienced the same sort of things.
Yeah.
So what are other things or other tips that you might have to convince a manager?
I found that it's really understanding that persuasion is a process. At the very beginning of my context-driven career, I was trying to convince my managers in a one-shot situation. So I was getting there and saying, this is how we're going to do it because it's so much better, and But it really, persuasion is a process. So understanding that there is mainly 3 phases to persuasion, which is the discovery phase, the gathering of information phase, and then the presentation phase. So if you go directly to the presentation phase without having any evidence, without having thought about what some of the problems that your manager might have, you might miss out on that great opportunity to try to convince them. So understanding that persuasion is a process is really important, and also that persuasion skills are skills that can be learned as well. That was something for me that was great, because I don't consider myself a very persuasive person by nature, but I kind of learned that there are ways that you can learn how to be a better persuader. So learning about rhetoric, learning about logic, and how to refute logical arguments that are not really logical. So learning how to do all of that, learning about logic, so it's a very good way to do it as well.
Right. Well, and I think to tag on to one of the things that you sort of slipped in there, like understanding the problems that your manager is experiencing is a big part of it. Like making them know that they understand that you have an understanding of what they're up against, and that you're there to support them and make them look better. Like all of that, I think, really helps in getting people on board and showing that, no, I'm not just like telling you what I need to do because this is what I want, but this is better for all of us.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, well, one part of my presentation, I did talk about trying to understand what your manager's objectives are. So we report to a manager, and our manager reports to a manager as well. So trying to understand what your manager's objectives are for the quarter, for the financial year, and try to frame your argument in a way that they will understand that you're trying to help not only yourself, but also help the team and help the company maybe to save some money, or depending on what you're trying to persuade them. But there's always a reason. But if you try to frame that reason in a context that your manager will understand, is really important as well.
And as a test manager, I think that was really important to me, because one thing, it helps me understand what someone's bringing to me that may be different than what we're already doing. But the other part of it is it exposes whether I, as a manager, am not making the mission clear enough, right? Because there might be a disconnect there, and that's a really good way to kind of get that feedback loop going. So it's very cool.
Indeed,
And I think people get intimidated sometimes, depending on who your manager is within the company. It's hard to just say, hey, what do you need from me? Like, I want to give you what you need to report to the people that you need to report to. And I think people don't, they're just so eager to please and eager to do the thing and provide. And you just chug and chug and chug, and you go collect all this data, but you don't ask why. And I think as testers, we want to ask why, and we do that while we're testing, but we don't always think about that in our relationships with other people in the organization.
Exactly, very good point.
So one of the other things that I noticed from your abstract is you said lead by example. So give me an example of how leading by example has been successful for you.
I've got a few examples of that. So one of them is I was trying to gather evidence to present to a manager and say, not just coming from me and saying this is a better way of doing it, but having evidence really helps them to see and understand how a different way of testing could be better. So leading by example was I was asking them, in a smaller project. So we had a bug, we had 2 streams at that stage at this place I was working. One was the major project stream, and the other one was the BAU stream, where you're testing your bug fixes and all that. So I said, if you give me the opportunity to move to that stream and test a few bug fixes, because they're not really in that stream that's very visible to all the stakeholders, and then I can gather some evidence for you there, and then we can discuss more about this. So I was in that stream for a couple of weeks, and I was able to use session-based test management. That's what I was trying to do at that stage, and I was able to gather some evidence by working on that project. So that really helped in that.
Nice. So other things? Is there anything we missed? Are there any takeaways that we absolutely must know from your talk?
I think there was a couple of things that I touched on. For example, that to remember that resisting change is natural. Like, a lot of managers do resist change, not because they are not willing to try new things, or they are not really good managers, just because resisting change is really natural. Remembering that your manager also reports to someone else, so you need to make sure that you understand what the big picture is as well. So having that conversation is important. Understanding what your manager's communication style is as well. That's really important when you're trying to present that evidence to them. So these are a few things that I covered in the presentation as well that I think are very, very important.
Awesome. Any last tips?
Yeah, I think just keep trying. I think it gets to a point where a tester, if a tester is trying to change things in a context-driven environment. So if you're trying to change things because you believe things could be better, that you keep trying. It is hard sometimes, but try to find maybe a support network. If you're not part of any groups, any testing groups online, there's plenty of them out there that could support you as well. So I think that's really important.
Do you have one that's a favorite?
I have a few actually. There are. There's not a name to it. We just get together on Skype. There's lots of Skype chats going on at the same time every day. So
this is a brand new world I've not heard of. I thought I knew about everything.
So it's just testers that kind of talk about testing in conferences, and then we just let's just keep the conversation going. So, but if you don't know any, I just encourage people online that they can ask me. We can definitely include new people in. We're not exclusive.
No, and we've got your tweet handle in your graphics.
Exactly.
So Allie's talking to people on Skype, and Karen's talking to people on Twitter.
Well, I'm on Twitter.
You're on Twitter, and you're on.
Where are you? You're talking to people at work.
I talk to people in my office.
Okay. By the way, we've actually got something from Twitter that I think it's sort of on topic. It's a little bit of a twist, which is bosses aren't always the only obstacle to change.
Yeah.
What if your testing colleagues don't seem to be open to new techniques?
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really important comment as well. I think when persuasion is really important in testing overall. I mean, when you're raising raising bugs, we need to be persuasive on the way that we write them, so we can get them fixed and all of that. And also in trying to persuade your colleagues. And I think the same techniques apply to your colleagues. So if you have colleagues that are opposed to what you're trying to change, you're applying the same techniques, trying to take them on a journey, I suppose, is what I say when you're trying to persuade someone. Just remember that for you to change your own mind about something takes time. So just remember that when you're trying to change someone else's mind about anything.
No, it's supposed to be
instant.
It's got
to be right now,
it's right now. That's right.
And sometimes when you take them on a journey, if the destination involves gelato or good coffee,
that always helps.
I have found that's really persuasive with my colleagues.
There are definitely different ways to persuade people. Yes.
The convincing fund.
But I say this somewhat in jest, and it's not just like a bribery thing, but like taking it out of the office and making it a more casual conversation as you're walking down the street.
Absolutely.
Instead of we need to sit down and we need to have a chat about this thing. It makes it much more intimidating. Whereas if it's the casual lunch conversation or hey, let's go get a cup of coffee, even with your boss,
exactly.
I think that makes it a more approachable way of doing it.
It's not that formal thing that you're trying to tell them what to do or how what they're doing is wrong. It's let's have this conversation. And another point really is when you bring that up is that making sure that people understand that you are listening to them, and you need to listen to them because again, persuasion is not coercion. You're not trying.
It's not?
No.
I know, Ben. This is mind blowing.
It's really not trying to hit people on the head with a stick. So making sure that they understand that you are listening. So make sure that you listen and that you have the active listening sort of conversation, that you repeat what they're saying and take into consideration what they're saying is really important as well.
Nice.
So.
Well, I've learned something from this. Clearly, it's not coercion. Got to work on that a little bit. But I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you very much.
And,
Thanks for having me.